punished as a pirate means a whole lot more than just walking the plank. From having body parts removed, to meeting the cat o' nine tails, and worse, you're about to learn why maybe you should just enjoy the Disney franchise. A relatively minor punishment on board a pirate ship was to be shackled around the wrists and ankles, known as being clapped in irons. The misbehaving pirate would typically be lobbed into some dark, dank corner of the ship with very little food or water, if any, for a period of time. Sometimes they might be left on deck during a terrible storm, or put in a basket, which was then hung from the bowsprit. And if you don't know pirate jargon like I do, that's the boom pointing forward from the ship's bow. Ugh. The pirate code of 18th century pirate captain Bartholomew Roberts, known as Blackbeard, stipulated a nasty punishment for a pirate caught stealing from a matey, something that we would modernly refer to as being maimed. The culprit's nose and ears would be diced off, and then he would have to endure a sort of semi-marooning, where he was put ashore somewhere that wasn't very nice, but did have some form of civilization. Notoriously awful pirate Edward Lau was fond of tormenting the passengers of ships he'd captured in a similar fashion. He would cut off ears, and one unlucky Portuguese captain had his lips removed, and the captain then cooked them and forced the prisoner to eat them. So we've got losing body parts with a side of self-consumption against will. I'll pass. Let's try on this pirate jargon for size. Avast ye lubbers, or else you'll get a keel haulin'. If your only knowledge of keel haulin' is playing the cards game on the Nintendo Sims games, you're cool, but that's not what I'm referring to here. When sentenced to a keel haulin', the naughty shipmate in question would be tied at the feet, dragged along the keel, which was the bottom of the boat, and back up again. So the victim would often be a red-soaked mess by the end, with their clothes and skin shredded by the sharp barnacles stuck to the ship. That was if they didn't, meet the end from the water, which frequently happened. Keel hauling was not intended as an end-of-life method, but it was often deadly. Kinda like witch trials. And by the way, there were reports of keel hauling happening right up until the middle of the 19th century. Sweating might not sound like a crazy punishment, but just give me a moment here. This relatively tame pirate punishment was a circular version of running the gauntlet. The transgressor would be tied to a central mast of the ship and made to dance around the deck. Everybody else would gather around and delight in tormenting the offender by jabbing him with cutlasses and daggers as he scurried past. This form of punishment would often be accompanied by the sound of a fiddle, with the crew knocking back some grog and jeering. Honestly, in modern day comparisons, just stick an entertainer in a mascot costume outside in like 90-degree heat, you'll get the same kind of hellish result. Trust me. The cat o' nine tails, also known simply as the cat, was a crazy implement of pain of 9 strands knotted at the ends. And sometimes those ends of each strand would have fish hooks or a musket ball attached, just for funsies. The tool would be kept in a sack and only come out when somebody needed to be flogged, ergo, the cat would be taken out of the sack, and that's how we got the expression, let the cat out of the bag. And according to many pirate codes, such as the 1724 code of John Phillips, captain of the Revenge, any rule breaker sentenced to a flogging could receive 39 lashes. This number was known as Moses' Law, and it was thought to be the maximum amount a man could survive. Well, a lot of folks got a lot more lashes than this, but then there were some folks that passed away after receiving far fewer, because we're not all the same. So the cat would often still be covered in human redness and guts from the last prisoner. Getting gangrene from the tool was probably what killed a lot of victims, which is a great example of why you need to clean your tools. Executive Dock was an end-of-life site near the docks in Wapping, East London, reserved for those guilty of crimes on the high seas, pirates, smugglers, and mutineers. Now, Executive wasn't the actual name, but I'm sure you can figure it out. With public slayings at this very specific dock beginning in about 1400, these early terminations saw the convicts staked to the beach and meeting their end courtesy of the rising tide. By the 16th century, the method had changed to capturing the prisoner in chains over this same spot until they were well dead. At high tides, the bodies would be completely submerged in water, and that's the end. They were normally cut down after a couple of days, but if people wanted to make an example or stake their claim, they'd leave it up longer. Large crowds would gather on the river in boats and on the shore to watch the very public events. Famous pirate Captain William Kidd met his end here in 1701, and as a grim deterrent, his body was covered in a lot of things to preserve it for longer and left suspended in an iron cage in Essex for 3 years. Now, the last ending of lives in this location took place in about 1830. The tiny island of Dead Man's Cay in Jamaica is now a very popular spot with tourists. But in the age of pirates being everywhere, the only boat trips out to this place were one-way, because this is where your life would end. Pirates captured by British officials would be rowed out to the quay and locked inside an iron cage that was hung from a post driven into the ground. And in the blazing Caribbean sun, without food or water, you're not gonna last long. While most pirates were only interested in loot, some captains were particularly vicious towards captured crews, especially if they thought they were hiding some sort of valuables somewhere on board. There was, too, the idea that tormenting a few victims would soon spread word amongst merchant shippings so that in the next capture, the crew would be much more likely to be compliant. So forms of torment, often called pirate persuasions, included being thrashed, flogged, chopped up, and having lit matches put out between your fingers. A favorite technique borrowed from the earlier buccaneers was to tie a cord around a captive's head and tighten it until the eyes popped out. A punishment used in the Royal Navy, which was after adopted by some pirates to make captives talk, was ducking at the yardarm. So this involved tying a rope around the waist and under the groin and arms of the victim, who was then hoisted up, and then you drop it. So you plummeted briefly into the sea, and then you'd be hauled up and dropped again and again and again until you either fessed up or curtains. The English pirate Charles Vane was particularly brutal. At his trial, eyewitnesses and former victims told about a variety of punishments inflicted. Mariners were thrashed, chopped up, even went the way of the rope necklace. One victim was tied to the front of the ship and then repeatedly impaled with burning matches. Another sadistic captain was the Welshman Bartholomew Roberts. Yeah, Black Bart. Captain Roberts was hugely successful in capturing many ships, but he still inflicted needless forms of torment anyway for funsies. In one notorious episode in October of 1720, Roberts ordered his men to cut off the ears of a group of Dutch captives. Some folks went the way of the rope necklace, and then they used their bodies for target practice. On another occasion, Roberts sentenced the governor of Martinique to rope necklace from his own yardarm. The cruelest of all pirates, though, was the Englishman Edward Lowe, active in the Caribbean and Eastern Atlantic from 1721 to 1724. Yeah, only 3 years. He built up a catalog of despicable crimes. In 1722, he chopped up and rope necklaced a group of Portuguese passengers, which included 2 friars. A cook on a French vessel was tied to the mast, and the ship burned to a wreck. Oh, and a Portuguese captain who had thrown his purse overboard, so his treasure, had his lips cut off, and then they were burned in front of him. Oh, and there was another fisherman who was forced to eat his own ears, while a captain taken off of Rhode Island had his heart taken out, and somebody else ate that one. Similarly, a crew member of the English pirate Edmund Condent was said to have once boiled and eaten the heart of a captive who had threatened to blow up their pirate ship. Now, this was another captain who took a lot of pleasure in harming his victims. We got rid of a lot of noses, lots of random ears of captives. Ooh, no thank you. For pirates that committed a serious breach of pirate code, so if you were deserting or if you were stealing doubloons from a fellow buccaneer, your punishment? Marooning, which was effectively a death sentence. You'd be taken to a remote, uninhabited island, by the way. No food, no fresh water, and they'd leave you there to die. Maybe they'd give you a bottle of rum, maybe they'd give you a pistol, maybe some explosive powder. That was it. Pirate Captain Edward England and a few of his chums were famously marooned on an island in the Indian Ocean back in 1720, but luckily they managed to escape after 4 months. How? Well, they somehow built a boat and sailed to Madagascar. And finally for today, one of the most famous aspects of pirate life is an unpopular pirate or captive being made to walk the plank. This method of ending lives involved the prisoner walking along a wooden plank balanced over the side of the ship. Now bound with ropes and forced at the very end of a weapon to inch their way to the end, they would then plunge off the edge into the water, sinking down to die in Davy Jones' locker, or, you know, the bottom of the sea. Danish pirate Don Durdrake and legendary New York river pirate Sadie the Goat were among those said to have forced captives to walk the plank. More often than not, though, the pirates probably were just chucking offending mateys overboard without the pomp and circumstance. Sorry, Hollywood. Well, that's all, folks. I've been Alexa. See ya!